Hey guys, it's Mick the Old Punk. I thought I would talk about something that I don't think many people are talking about online, and that is mental health and side hustles. Now, when I was younger, side hustles were basically called part-time jobs or part-time work. And in the quote-unquote gig economy of the past 15, 20 years, it's become trendy, almost sexy to say you have a side hustle. And there are pros and cons to this, right? So I put together a list, and I'm happy to put it together in a document if you want to download it. But I put together a list of 4 pros and 4 cons of side hustles with regards to mental health. And then if you want to stick around to the end, not only will I give you my conclusion, I will give you some advice that I gave to a young vendor. One of my sales vendors was asking me last week on side hustles and setting them up, this, that, and the other. And I gave him some real-world advice from someone, me, who's been in business for myself for over 20 years. I gave him some real-world advice that I don't think people are giving online. And if they are, I've not seen them, right? So stick around to the end if that interests you, and I'll break it down there. So if you just want to hear the list, here are the headings, right? The 4 pros. Number 1, sense of control and purpose. Number 2, financial relief. Number 3, a creative outlet. And number 4, increased confidence and skills. And then conversely, the 4 negative in regards to mental health are burnout and stress, which is a big one for me, lack of work-life balance, financial pressure, which is interesting, and perfectionism and comparison. You have everything you need if you don't want to watch the rest of this video, because now I'm just going to break down those parts and then go into my conclusion and the advice I gave my vendor. So the first positive one was a sense of control. And basically what that is, a sense of control and purpose. And what that is if you're in a job that you don't like, it's a dead-end job, maybe doesn't pay much, maybe you have crappy people you work for, crappy employers, or maybe you don't have much opportunity to grow. Starting a side hustle can give you a purpose that, hey, if I make this successful, I can do X, Y, and Z and get to where I need to be. And it can also allow you to think that if I just put in this work and this effort, this time frame, I can have a level of control over my finances and my life. So that's definitely a positive, right? The second one is financial relief. Most people are going to start a side hustle as an attempt to make money. Some might do it as a hobby that turns into a side hustle, but I think the vast majority of people see it as a part-time income source, regardless of what you call it. And if you start doing it right and you pick the right side hustle, you could start making a little bit of extra money. You might make enough money to buy a cup of coffee. You might make enough money to, retool your wardrobe or buy new tools to work on the house. Or you might get it to the point where it's like, hey, I can quit my full-time gig and do this full-time. So there's definitely a financial relief, a financial benefit to that. And then the third one was a creative outlet. Now this one is probably more for the more creative of you watching this. That's not to say that a non-creative person can't be creative, but they might struggle with coming up with the ideas. They might struggle with the actual creativity of it. But what I mean by that is you can literally come up with an idea of how to do something that very few or no one else is doing. I was watching a video the other night, a camping video out in Korea. And there's a whole bunch of solo campers, and one of them, they were making their dinner and they poured out a glass of wine, but the glass of wine had a lid on it. and it's literally sold a glass of wine in a glass. Like, what a novel idea, you know? Who would have thought you could sell a glass of wine by the glass in a glass? But somebody did, and clearly they're making money. That's a really creative way to fill a hole in the market, right? So you could be creative, and I think for some of us, that's more important than others, right? And then the fourth one in the pros is the increased confidence and skills. None of us are great at everything. Some of us are naturally great at some things, but the vast majority of us have to work on something a long time before we become great at it. And is that what, if you put 10,000 hours into something, then you become an expert at it or something? And the truth is, when you start a new job or start a business or side hustle, you're probably not going to be very good at it at first, unless you've been doing this for some time, some other place. But the more you do it, the more you're going to start becoming more efficient. Some things that don't need to be done a certain way, you can change that. Some things that don't need to be done at all, you can drop that. Some things need to be added, you can add that. And over time, you streamline the process. You become more efficient, more judicious with your time. And that produces skills, organization skills, operational skills, but it also allows you to increase profitability, right? Because the more efficient you can do something, the less time it takes, the more money you can make on it. So those are the four pros. Now the four negatives, the first one is burnout and stress. Now, not everybody would think about it in this way, but I want you to for a second. If you're in a full-time job, especially if it's a stressful one, and especially if you don't work for the best people, coming home and working evenings and weekends for potentially no money initially, and possibly even spending money to get this thing off the ground, it's going to be very stressful. And unless you are in a good place mentally and physically, you're going to start really feeling the stress of this. And depending on how long it goes and what's going on in your regular life, burnout's going to become a consideration. And the longer you do it, the more burnout is going to become a consideration. And it's a vicious cycle. The more burnout you have, the more stress you have. The more stress you have, the more burnout you have. And if you're trying to get the side hustle, essentially a new business, off the ground, you're the chief cook and the chief cook and bottle washer. And the buck stops with you, as they say, right? You have to do all the fiddly bits that when you start making money, you can pay people to do it for you, right? So that's a huge thing to consider. If you're already in a really crappy situation, starting a side hustle might seem a good thing, but it might not be the right time. I'm not telling you don't do it. I'm just telling you consider your situation. And this leads nicely into the second one, which is a lack of work-life balance. Now, depending on who you talk to about this, there are some that will tell you there is no such thing as a life-work balance if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. And that's true if you are more of the workaholic. If you're more of the regular person, I think it's very difficult, but you can find some sort of work balance. It's something that you actively have to say, I am not going to work this time. I am going to step away from the computer at this time. I am going to do something else at this time. You can't just like, well, I'll get to it when I get to it. You have to, it's self-care, right? You have to actively practice some level of self-care. And then the third one is financial pressure. If you are struggling financially and you're putting all this time and effort into something, you might make money, you might not. Eventually you should if you keep at it, right? But who knows how quickly it's going to be. And you see these videos online of I made $1 bazillion in 10 minutes. If that's true, that's the outlier. That's not the norm. But let's say that you started a side hustle that required a financial investment on your part. Maybe you had to buy some product. Maybe you paid for a website. Maybe you paid for a class, I don't know. You're already in debt before you started. And if you're not making money for a while, and one of the goals was to make money to help you with your financial situation, you are actually adding to the situation. I know of one YouTuber who started a channel, and she's become quite successful in the last few months, but she had to borrow some money from her savings to be able to sign up for a class. And it's worked out. She's having tremendous success. But her and her husband had a real argument because he didn't know she borrowed, $5,000 from their savings account, but she believed in herself and it paid off. And I'm not telling you to do that. I'm just giving you an example that sometimes you will have to go into debt to get a business going. Quite often you have to go into debt to get a business going. But if that's on top of your already struggling financial situation and the side hustle isn't making money or might not anytime soon, that's additional financial pressure that you might not have considered before. And then the fourth negative I have is perfectionism and comparison. The biggest mistake you can do is compare yourself to others. And what do? 9 times out of 10, we compare ourselves to others. It's a mug's game. You can't do that. And perfectionism, I can tell you, perfectionism is one of the worst things to struggle with. Procrastination is the byproduct of perfectionism. Why should I even bother starting this? Because I know it's not going to be perfect. Not a lot of people think of it in that light, but that's what procrastination is. In some things, I won't start until I put enough pressure on myself that I have to do it because it's not perfect. When I do these videos and I hear my dog moving around or scratching or something, I'm so tempted to stop recording and start again because it's not perfect. But I also want these things to be real and raw, and this is my life, right? So yeah, perfectionism, especially if you're struggling with trauma, perfectionism is not good. And you really have to learn the concept of good enough versus perfectionism. That's something that my therapist has been banging into my head for the last couple of years, and it's slowly starting to sink in. So my conclusion is that side hustles can be good, but if you don't plan for them correctly, you could potentially be setting yourself up for more stress and more burnout and more financial hardship. But if you plan, try to put your ego on the side and realize that you don't have all the answers. And if you pick the right side hustle, it could be something good. So let me wrap this up now with the advice I gave to the sales rep. He was asking me about this. And he's been asking a lot of people. He's been getting a lot of advice from people. But when we spoke, he told me that the advice I gave him, no one else has given him. He thought I was going to tell him, well, you've got to be prepared to lose money initially because you've got to spend money to make money. That's not always true. But in the vast majority of cases, it can be true. It really depends on the side hustle. But here's what I told him. There's an awful lot of videos out there promoting side hustles and get rich quick and blah, blah, blah. But one of the things that I don't see many or anybody telling you is what is the arc of that side hustle? Meaning, has that side hustle peaked? Are you at the beginning of the arc? Are you at the end of the arc? Or are you at the top of the arc? So that means if you come in to a particular side hustle and you're one of the first people there, you have the potential to make a lot of money. If you come to it when it's at the peak, it's completely saturated and everybody's doing it. And so you can put all the work in, but how are you going to get found? There's so many people doing it. And if you come into it at the end of the arc, people have lost interest in it. There's very little there. So you're putting all this time and effort in, and it's not worth your while. And I'll give you a quick real world, for instance. A couple of years ago, there was very few videos on YouTube that you could listen to or watch that were playing things like rain sounds. So if you can't sleep, you play rain sounds in the forest, on a tent, in a car, whatever. And then about 2 or 3 years ago, it became really popular to create these videos. So it literally went from, a few creators doing this to now there are legions and legions of creators doing this. And YouTube has tightened up its rules. So if I start a channel and I'm just, playing a thunderstorm, and you come along and you copy that, YouTube is now smart enough that they compare the two, and if it's a direct copy, they won't monetize you. They'll let you keep the video, but they won't monetize. So you have to either create new sounds every time, or sample in your own sounds and add video as well that makes it unique. Whereas a couple of years ago, YouTube didn't care because there wasn't that many people doing it. So this is an example of the curve, or the arc as I call it, going up and then it's coming back down. And that's the advice I gave them. I said, I'm not telling you don't start a side hustle. I'm telling you be judicious on the side hustle you start. Do your research. And he's like, well, how do I know what side hustle I want to do? I said, okay, let me give you another piece of knowledge that most people aren't going to give you, but in time, this is going to become common knowledge. And I said, use something like ChatGPT. You can use Copilot, doesn't matter. And then tell ChatGPT that you want to start a side hustle, and then ask it to interview you like a job interview, but specifically say, and only ask one question at a time. So for instance, hi, I'm Mick. I want to start a side hustle. I don't know what I want to do, but I'd like to start a side hustle that hasn't peaked in popularity, one that I can make money at, and I'd like to be creative about this, or maybe not. Can you interview me, asking me just one question at a time? And you will be amazed how within 5 minutes, you will find out what you want to do. You might find out you don't want to do the side hustle, but the ChatGPT, or the AI, is going to act like an unpaid employee or an unpaid job interviewer. And if you follow that path, I promise you within minutes, you'll know what side hustle you want to do, or if you even want to do one. And that was the advice I gave to him. So advice is free and you get what you pay for. All right, guys, have a good day.